nothing left to do now but live.
What drew you to the musicals of the 1930s?
Well, I mean, it sort of is a funny place to start because they're definitely like a side angle. We're writing a story about this woman, reinvigorated, the Bride of Frankenstein, who, in the original Bride of Frankenstein, doesn't speak at all, and is in the movie for 2 minutes,
Just barely at the end.
Just barely at the end. She does also play Mary Shelley in the beginning. I was very curious after watching that original film, what was going on with her, having been dug up from a grave and told that she's supposed to marry someone who she doesn't recognize and who, in fact, she has never met. And yeah, it made me curious about getting into her mind. That said, I also, and this is getting to answering your question, I get Frank's ask. I do. Thinking about Frankenstein in the book, Frankenstein's monster, we call him Frank and Frankenstein because he never would have called himself Frankenstein's monster. So for ease of conversation, I'm going to call him Frank. He is, in the book, is monstrous and kills people, children, women, innocent people. But he's also very, very human and very, very smart. He, learns French by listening to some people speak French next to him in a barn. He, devours philosophy that he finds in a suitcase. He's smart, vulnerable, and very, very lonely. So I get the need, the life or death need to have some kind of a companion. I understand it. But, what about her? So that's the basic concept. Then the 30s musicals came about because I realized I wanted Frank's primary relationship to be with a movie star because he's so alienated and he's so alone. And that kind of relationship is totally one-sided, right? He feels he has a deep emotional connection with this guy who doesn't, of course, know him. So then it has to be set in an era where there are movies. And why the 30s? Well, those movies are so joyful, so delightful, but so totally and utterly based in fantasy. And this movie is the opposite of that. This movie is about the cracking open of that fantasy and the acknowledging of the whole heart, the whole person, monstrous and all, in order to be able to love. So to be able to bounce my monsters off of the kind of like Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers vibe, it put them into relief,
Obviously, you're not adapting the novel in any way, but it feels like such a smart modernization of what the monster does, watching these people feeling isolated, very one-sided. That is exactly what Frank is doing with a screen.
Right.
And trying to learn how to be human through these products of fantasy.
Right, because he has no interaction with other humans, really.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work for him at all.
And I imagine it was a lot of fun to dive into making that fantasy as corny and as RKO Fred Astaire as possible.
I didn't want it to be corny. I wanted it to be as delightful as I find it. In fact, what we did is we put Frank and Jake, Frank and Ronnie Reed into old footage. We used pieces of old footage and we placed them into it like a composite.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So just you grab a little bit of Follow the Fleet and you sort of do the choreography?
Yeah, well, we built our own choreography, but we would have as a kind of a, when you watch the movie, they are placed into those old movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really fun.
Yeah.
Were you using sort of original songs from the 30s or coming up with your own stuff?
We were using entirely, for Ronnie Reed, it's all Annette Henshaw songs.
Incredible.
That Jake covers.
He does a fantastic job with them.
He definitely does, yeah.
I kind of want to ask a little bit, I mean, this is half a writing question and half a casting question. Do you in general, and for this film in particular, have folks in mind as you're envisioning the characters, or do you like to be surprised?
I don't. I think it's better for me as a writer to try to keep my mind completely open so that the characters can turn into whoever they need to be without actors attached to them. That said, actors do pop into mind, and I usually try to push them out.
I imagine then going through the process of casting, you sort of get these wonderful surprises when an actor brings themselves to the character that you've been living with.
Yeah, hopefully I mean, because I was an actor for so long and experienced many times being on sets where people were not interested in surprise, or people were not really interested in my mind as an artist coming in and being a part of the whole.
Right.
And I learned, and I think if you talk to many actors, they'll say the same thing. You know, I learned how to just go like, okay, I see you're not interested. Well, I'll just protect a little bit of real estate around myself that I can then express myself inside of. But it's a game I learned how to play, and, you know, it's all right. But I got tired of it as an actress, which is part of why I moved into being a writer and a director.
Makes sense.
And I wanted to make sure that I had a set where no one had to play that game, where ultimately, look, it's completely up to me what ends up in the movie. There's no reason not to try to create as much space for personal expression and surprise as possible. And hopefully, and in this case, absolutely, I'm working with actors who have a point of view, who have joined this project because it resonates with them in terms of something that they want to say or explore. So not only were there surprises in terms of casting, there weren't really, because I was very lucky in this case and pretty much went to the people who ended up in the film. So what happens is you kind of imagine you want someone, you fall in love with that idea, you know, and they are the only Frank who could ever be. And, you know, in this case, I went and got him, but I've had it in other cases where you fall in love with something and you don't get it, and then, or someone, and then you kind of go and fall in love with someone else, you know. It's an interesting process because, of course, well, this is what I think. I think that there are quite a few very, very good actors, and there's a tiny handful of brilliant ones. And if you're working with the brilliant ones, well, there are a few who could do it. I mean, I would say that The Bride maybe could only have been played by Jessie Buckley, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of who else to slot in there, and I am coming up blank.
Same.
It's just such a beautiful, layered, and she lets you see everything. It's fantastic.
That's what's so brilliant about Jessie, I think, is that she's wise enough to know, or like really, really good actors know, that the whole spectrum of feelings is required. You know, not just the beautiful.
Yeah. And that no feeling is simple either. Like, her rage isn't just rage. It's
right, exactly. I mean, I think required for this role is both like a fierceness and a deep, deep vulnerability simultaneously, kind of constantly. An intellectual, like wildly intellectual aspect mixed with something totally irrational, a beauty mixed with something actually ugly and monstrous, you know, and you go on and on and on.
Yeah.
But all of it is required. And I would say, really, that's what I want with all of my actors. I want the whole spectrum. I want the whole picture.
Speaking of whole spectrum stuff, can I ask a little bit about your Mary Shelley?
Yeah.
Whom I adore, whatever purgatory she finds herself in.
Yeah.
That seems like it's such an interesting idea, and seems like such a thing that would require a lot of finessing to figure out how much is too much, where does it go.
That's true.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that process of figuring out where her voice comes through.
Well, basically, I watched The Bride of Frankenstein. It kind of hooked me. I was thinking, is there a way to consider some new version of this? And I studied English at Columbia, but somehow I never read Frankenstein. Probably it was on a syllabus and I didn't read it. You know, it's totally possible. I mean, it must have been. But anyway, I went and read it. And I loved it, obviously. Like, here we are. But I literally closed that book and had a kind of fantasy. I kind of thought, is this all that she wanted to say? Is there more? Were there things that were unpublishable in the early 19th century, maybe even unthinkable, that she didn't get said for whatever reason? Now, that's my fantasy. That's my dream life. That's my wish. I have no evidence, right? I don't care. I'm not dealing there in evidence, right?
This is also a woman who, like,
radical.
notoriously like lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. Like,
well, that's right. That's what they say. Had her husband's heart wrapped in a shroud in her desk.
Yeah. Like, I don't think she'd be mad about it.
No. She's a radical, and like, look at her mom. You know.
Oh God, yeah.
Mary Wollstonecraft, also radical, incredibly smart, outside the box. I mean, I will say, this movie is a celebration of the aspects of all of ourselves that will not get in our box, that will not stay in our box, that will not fit in our box. And so Mary Shelley, that fantasy about her came to me, and she just kind of got into my script. And I tried to get rid of her. I did. I tried to get rid of her. I let her be in there as a kind of wild imagining, as a kind of fantasy, and she wouldn't go. And she ended up being, for me and Jesse, and I hope for the audience, like a kind of provocateur. I think she's very loving, but she's loving in a kind of a radical way. She has a real fierceness to her. I'm in my house, like if like a door slams shut or, you know, something fun, lights go out, we'd say, oh, maybe it was Mary Shelley.
Nice.
But yes, it did take real care, real thoughtfulness to walk the line of how much works, how much helps, how much doesn't. When do we tilt off the tightrope? That was definitely, it took real care.
Are you sort of a tinkerer, kind of better like this, better like that? Do you want to put it all in and then figure out where it feels too much? I'm curious kind of how that works for you.
I think I'm almost like the way I am as an actress. I have an intention, I have an objective, I have a need, and I'm just trying to go after it. Okay, I'm going to try again to go after it. You know, like as an actor, if you go take by take, and I think it's similar in the post process in editorial, that, you know, I hear the tone, I hear the need, I hear the intention, and I'm just slowly getting closer and closer and closer to it being a laser beam toward what it is I'm trying to say. And there were times when I really believe in collaboration. I love my editor, Dylan Titchener. He's brilliant. And there were things he was absolutely wrong about, and there were things he was absolutely right about. You know, like, Maggie, you gotta lose this. You gotta let go of it. And it'd take me time sometimes to let go of things that worked fundamentally, like something that didn't work, that like just wasn't good. I want to get rid of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And he says, he's like, directors always want to get rid of what doesn't work. It's hard for directors to get rid of what does work. What's actually good work, but doesn't belong in the movie.
Yeah.
You know? So that was such a, I mean, I feel like Dylan is like one of my best friends after the, you know, almost year I spent in the cutting room with him.
That's awesome.
He was amazing.
I'd love to ask you a little bit too about the look of the film and working with Lawrence. Yeah, I'm just curious how you guys sort of settled on the look.
Well, it's a combination of a lot of things. I think, yes, it's Larry. I mean, his name is Larry. No, Lawrence is correct, but I just for ease of conversation.
Sure.
I could call him Larry. He and Karen Murphy, my production designer, you know, who obviously has a huge impact on the look. I would say a few things. I mean, one is like, it's set in the 30s. It's not set in the 30s either in a totally, it's 30s by way of 1981 downtown New York.
Yeah.
And the anachronistic aspect of that, I'm celebrating. I want it. I like it. If it was too much 1930s, it didn't feel correct. If it was too much 1981, it didn't feel correct. If it was too much right now, it didn't feel correct. So it's a kind of combination of all of those things in an imaginary place. There was always an aspect of the iconic that was required in order to tell this story, both in the looks of the characters, but also in where they work and where they live, and generally the tone. It was this combination of the iconic, almost graphic novel, mixed with something very, very, very real. So that if she's in one orange dress and could be drawn in a graphic novel in that dress for the entire movie, it also at a certain point has to have sweat stains in the armpits and rips where there would be rips, and runs in her stockings, and, you know, marks and blood, and all of it had to feel really, really human and lived in, right alongside the iconic. And that's, you know, more design, I guess, than actually shooting with Larry. I mean, I learned so much from Larry, and he was an incredible partner. I mean, from right in the very beginning, I wanted to work with him because it was clear to me in a way that it wasn't clear with the other, like, I was like speed dating DPs, by the way. I met so many DPs that were so incredible.
That's awesome.
So interesting, so talented, and fancy. And like, Larry had to be my guy because I knew he understood in the most complicated way the emotional trip through the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The real way through this movie is in the tiny embroidery shifts in the tapestry of like emotional language between the characters.
Right.
That's the way you go through it. Car chases are not. That's the truth. And Larry understood that like drinking water. Like he and I were totally on the same page. Then in terms of the creating the cinematic language, I mean, I have so much to say about this. I feel like we're going to run out of time. But let me say this. When I started prep on The Lost Daughter, the first film I made, it was COVID. It was early COVID. It was pre-vaccine COVID. And Hélène Louvard, who was my cinematographer, was in Paris and I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on Zoom. And she asked me about the light in the very first page 1 scene. And for a moment, I thought, I don't care about light. I don't care about light. I don't actually care about lensing. I don't care about frames. That's not what I care about. What I care about is the storytelling, the emotional reality.
Yeah.
And then she said, just describe the light to me. And I did. And I realized immediately, no, I care so much about light. I care so much about lensing. I care so much about aspect ratio. It's even though when I started that movie, I didn't always have the words to explain. But then I started working on that movie. We have like 5 lenses. Truly, we have no dolly track. I mean, we had nothing. But I was like, I never want to see this scene in a medium shot on a 50.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Like it looks like TV, you know, and Hélène would be like, no, Maggie, we have to show where we are. And I'd be like, I actually don't think that we do. And I think I started to come up with my own cinematic language, which I really, which was very different in that movie, obviously, but became clear to me that in order to tell the story I needed to tell, I needed to learn about what lenses were doing and what aspect ratio we were in. So Larry just became like a major teacher. And one of the most exciting things about working with him was disagreeing with him and knowing that I had a point of view. Like often I felt like I really love the magic and the value of very long lenses.
Yeah.
They're not for always, and they're not for
every film.
No. Well, they probably are for all of my films, I think, but I mean, at least now. But in this movie that's full of magic and also that's full of a kind of like mind connection between people.
Yeah.
I found often I was pushing him toward longer lenses. And like, for instance, like in the club.
That's where my mind was going, yeah.
Right. Like I was like, it wasn't working at first. Larry loves this like 58 anamorphic lens. And he was like, we're starting to shoot on that. And I was like, it just doesn't look like an incredible club. We're exposing the ways in which it's just a regular place, you know?
Right.
And I needed it to be.
No, it needed to be Club Fever Ray.
And it needed to be the best club you ever imagined you could end up in.
Yeah.
And that's why we needed a 150, you know? The other thing Larry really, really taught me a lot about was IMAX, which I knew nothing about. And it was shot for IMAX, meaning that we built the movie around a changing aspect ratio and a vertical grow.
Yeah.
And that was something that I really didn't know about. I had barely consumed anything in IMAX. I know I was in The Dark Knight, one of the first kind of, I think probably the first use of like real dramatic film that used IMAX. And I think I'd seen like something at like the Museum of Natural History about rock climbing in IMAX. I think that's like it. And so for me, it was like learning these tools, and not only on the job, but learning them and digesting them in my own way.
Yeah.
And what I've been told by the people who I got to know really well at IMAX is that the way that we use it is different than it's ever been used before. And that's partially to do with giving these tools to someone like me with a perspective that is new as a woman, you know, and also, I think also because I was approaching it as a beginner. Well, first of all, I'll say you were asking about shooting monsters and respecting them and shooting them beautifully. I mean, that's why we chose a native 2:3:9 aspect ratio. Yeah. It has that kind of cinematic, old school love story, epic love story feeling.
Absolutely very epic. Yeah.
Right. And then we chose, if you go see the movie, if you're lucky enough to see the movie in one of the 143 IMAX theaters, there's only 40 in the world. We grow both to a 190 aspect ratio and to a 143 aspect ratio. So if you go see it in 143, the entire movie will not be in 143. It will shift between 239, 190, and 143. And there are times where we have slow animated grows over 3 cuts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's new.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what it does because, you know, the movie's about bringing people back from the dead. There's magic in it. And it actually, in an IMAX theater with those vertical grows, creates a feeling of magic.
Yeah, a summoning. It's great.
Yeah.
You've talked about sort of the test screening process and how that was sort of a new experience for you. And I'm curious, like, you obviously, I'm sure you get a ton of information and a ton of feedback, and some of it is useful and some of it isn't. Mm-hmm. How do you sort that, and kind of who are your allies and brain trust that you sort of talk about the different issues with?
I guess I'm like interested in the fantasy that movies are like born full grown out of someone's mind. Movies are a process, and bouncing them off of people, both people who are other artists and people who are not, is incredibly valuable. One thing Michelle Satter, who runs Sundance and Sundance Institute, said to me about the script for The Lost Daughter, she gave me some notes on it once. She said, if 5 people at a party tell you you're drunk, maybe you should lie down. So I think what I'm looking for is a common thread.
Yeah, thread.
And
sure.
I found that on The Lost Daughter too, where it was COVID, so I didn't have big screenings. In fact, I didn't screen that movie until it screened at Venice. But I had, I would sort of give links to 4 or 5 people at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, a week later, 4 or 5 different people, but all at the same time. And what I was looking for was a common thread. Okay, this is confusing. Okay, this isn't working. Ooh, this is really working. And then there will always be outlying notes where you're like, okay, that's your very specific experience of this, and it's not going to serve the movie. Or even some people who'd have some brilliant thing, you know, that would serve the movie. But mostly what I'm looking for is a common thread.
That seems like a very sane way to go through all of that.
And then also at the same time, you're feeling how the room feels and where people are on the roller coaster with you and where they're moved. And that's another sort of way of using those screenings, which is they're all like very exciting to me and very interesting. Yeah.
The few times I've been like a film usher and you're at the back and can sort of see everybody have that same reaction.
Right.
You're like, okay, that works.
Right. It's like there's an amazing thing about going to see a movie in the theater, which is, it's interesting. A novel is built to be a solitary experience. It's built to be you alone with the book in your room, you know, or wherever you're reading. A movie is not built for that. TV is, you know, but a movie is built to be a communal experience where you are, especially like I would say this movie where you're asked to look at yourself. You know, you're asked to participate. I don't make it clear who's good and who's bad and who should be in love and who shouldn't. You're asked to be invested. And if the movie also is daring you to look at the parts of yourself that are monstrous or that don't fit in the box, which I hope that it is, then doing that in a communal space with strangers in the dark becomes a kind of like a special experience, like going to a concert or something, going on a trip together, going on a roller coaster together, gasping together, you know.
The championship final that you all watched together.
Right.
Especially because you mentioned that this film is so participatory and inviting folks to kind of see the monstrous in themselves. That resonated with something you've said about not wanting, I love this term, by the way, stormtrooper violence, and making sure that like things have cost and complications and that the characters feel the weight of what they've done.
Of violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to ask you kind of about how you treat violence.
Yeah, well, I think violence is a part of the world that we live in. And this movie that includes sexual violence, and we can also say sexual violence is a part of the world that we live in. Like, it's real.
Sure is.
We're seeing it all over the place all the time. So It's something that I think about. It's something that I experience as a part of being in the world. And I guess it was important to me that it be disturbing. And so what's disturbing about all of it? The consequence, right? And what I mean by stormtrooper violence is, like shooting these guns that make this noise that you made when you were a kid, and guys in white masks fall to the ground, and there is really no consequence.
Yep. No face, no blood.
Right.
No nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
So so how did I try to create that? I mean, like with that cop, for instance, right? There's a moment where the bride shoots a cop, and I mean, it's in everything. It's in the actor, of course. It's in the 48 frames. It's in the way the bullet hole breaks his clothes.
Yeah.
And choosing a take that feels very, very real. At one point, you said it's in the script. She says, that cop, he looked so surprised. That's sad.
Yeah.
And as I've said, right, there were moments where people took me to task about the violence, and I wonder if it's because the violence has a real cost every single time it's in the movie. It's not like it's so bloody. There is bloody.
Yeah.
There's some things in it that have some gore, but I mean, like compared to so many movies, I don't think that's the thing. I think it's the emotional cost that's disturbing to people.
Yeah, and I think you've just had the fun musical fantasy, and I think there is sort of a desire to put films in boxes of like, this is a fun one or this is a violent one, and The Bride is both.
Well, right. The Bride is a lot of things.
It's a lot of things.
And I'm not, and just in terms of talking about like boxes and getting out of them, it's true as genre too. Yeah. I mean, I'm not really interested in making like a movie that fits clearly into one genre. We've had so many of those, and also it was a language that was made by other people with a different experience than mine. And I feel like if I have a very clear and specific intention, why not use aspects of all the genres if they're useful to me? Think about a movie like One Battle After Another, for instance. What genre is that? I think we're kind of in post-genre times. But you're right. And I think putting a sort of a dance number next to some violence with an emotional cost does take you off your guard.
Yeah, we're also like genre literate, but we don't necessarily want to be challenged by it. And it's very cool the many ways that The Bride does that. Maggie, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.